Hello, welcome to the 2020 National On-Site Wastewater Recycling Association Annual Conference. My name is Chris LeClair. I am the Director of the Otter Tail County Land and Resource Management Office in Otter Tail County, Minnesota. I am also on the Board of Directors of NOWRA. I am here today to talk about some of the changes that we made in the spring of 2020 to allow our program and allow the septic industry to continue to operate during a nationwide pandemic. First, however, anytime I speak at a national conference, since Minnesota is flyover country and we don't really get a lot of attention with our sports teams, I like to spend a little time talking about our state. It's my one chance to talk about how great Minnesota is. The word Minnesota is a Dakota Indian word that means sky-tinted water, so our state is named after an Indian term. We're the land of how many lakes? A lot of people might know this. A lot of people might not realize how many lakes we really have. Our license plate says that we're the land of 10,000 lakes, but actually there's a little bit more. We have a total of 11,842 lakes in the state of Minnesota. We have a lot of water. We have 6,564 rivers and streams. We're also very cold. We boast the coldest temperature in the lower 48 states. On February 2nd, 1996, in Barris, Minnesota was negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's air temperature, not wind chill. It's not out of the ordinary where we have a week in January where we're sometimes 35, 36, 37 degrees below Fahrenheit for a few days. It gets cold up here. Some of the products that you might be familiar with that come from Minnesota, Cheerios is made out of the General Mills plant in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And there's also a very small company in St. Paul called Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, which you might better know as 3M. We're the home of many celebrities that we're very proud of. We're the home of Prince, Sarah Hager's favorite, one of my favorites, Bob Dylan. Judy Garland is from Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Charles Schulz, the artist and writer for the Peanuts cartoons, is from St. Paul, Minnesota. Jessica Lange is from Stillwater, Minnesota. And we also have been the location of a few movies, the most notable being the movie Fargo in the mid-90s. It was a little bit of a caricature about how we are, but yes, we really do talk that way. And if you want a lesson, I'll give free lessons on how to talk Minnesotan. Don't you know? We do really stupid things in the winter, but we celebrate the fact that it's cold here. We do stupid things like jump into a frozen lake to raise money for charity. Here's a sequence of pictures of my wife and I this past February jumping into Otter Tail Lake with a bunch of people from Otter Tail County to raise money for Special Olympics. You haven't lived until you cut a hole in a frozen lake and jumped into it in the middle of winter time. It really does take your breath away. And the thing I'm most proud of, the thing I'm the biggest fan of, is the sport of hockey. We are the state of hockey. Why? Hockey players are the state's biggest export. The state of Minnesota provides 39% of Division I hockey players. So all the college hockey players in the country, 39% of them come from Minnesota. We also have provided 23% of NHL players that are born in America. Enough about the state of Minnesota. Now let's talk about what we're here to really talk about, which is septic systems. And let's talk about how we regulate septic systems and the number of governmental and educational branches that help us regulate septic systems in Minnesota. There are 3 entities that take part in the regulation of septic systems in Minnesota. The first being the statewide agency, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. They're the main regulatory agency in the state for septic systems. They provide state rules, that is a state minimum that counties must adopt. to regulate septic systems in each county. They're also the agency that licenses all septic contractors in the state of Minnesota, whether you're an installer, a designer, a maintainer, a service provider, or a local regulator. You have to be licensed and certified in the state of Minnesota to be in the septic industry. Then there's the University of Minnesota, the educational organization that Sarah Hager hails from. The on-site sewage treatment program is the educational and research arm of our industry in the state. They train all septic contractors in the state of Minnesota. Again, any installer, designer, maintainer, local regulator, we all take training classes from the University of Minnesota. This is unique, and it's something we're really proud of. The fact that regulators like myself, who is also a registered sanitarian, has to take the same classes, sit in the same room with the same instructors as the contractors that we are someday going to regulate. That puts us in a unique position because we all come out of that room with the same set of information, and it provides us with some tools that we can establish good working relationships with our contractors because we've all heard the same message and we've all gotten the same training. And then, of course, there's a local unit of government. That's counties and cities and townships. Minnesota statute requires that every county, all 87 counties in the state of Minnesota, must have an ordinance regulating septic systems. Cities and townships have an option. They don't have to have an ordinance, but if they choose to, their ordinance has to be as strict as the county ordinance, which is as strict as the minimum state rules. Counties and cities are the regulatory agency that permits septic system designs. And then we also inspect the installation of septic systems as they're being installed. Let's talk about where I'm from, Otter Tail County. Here's a map of the state of Minnesota. You can see we are in the kind of northern, central, western part of the state. We're about an hour east of Fargo. Otter Tail County is made up of 62 townships. Our area is 1,971 square miles, which is larger than the state of Rhode Island, which is only 1,212 square miles. Our population is just shy of 58,000 people, and that population triples in the summertime. Why do you suppose that is? Looking at the aerial, what would draw people to Otter Tail County in the summertime? That's correct, the lakes. How many lakes do we have in Otter Tail County? It's up for debate, but right now, the number that we agree on is 1,049 lakes. That's 8% of the lakes in the state of Minnesota are in Otter Tail County. Otter Tail County has more lakes than any other county in the United States. We have so many lakes that 703 of them, that's 67% of the lakes in our county, don't even have a name. They're listed on the DNR, the Department of Natural Resource website, as unnamed. We have 790 lakes that are greater than 25 acres. Why is that important? In the state of Minnesota, lakes that are over 25 acres are regulated by shoreland regulations. Anything underneath that acreage is exempt. We have a lot of water. Otter Tail County has 178,186 acres of surface water. That's just lakes. The average lake size in Otter Tail County is 128 acres. 790 lakes are over the minimum size of 25 acres to be regulated by state shoreland rules. Our minimum lake size is 1.56 acres, which is, of course, an unnamed lake. And then our largest is 14,083 acres, which is Otter Tail Lake, which is what you see in the picture there. Some fun facts about all the lakes that we have in Otter Tail County. We have 2,354 miles of shoreline in Otter Tail County. That's equivalent to driving from Minneapolis to Acapulco, Mexico. That's how much shore we have in our little county here in northwestern Minnesota. We have 157 miles of river. We have 134 public accesses. That's where people can put their boats in the water and go fishing or pleasure boating for the day. We have a dock ordinance in Otter Tail County. We have 16,000 docks in Otter Tail County. We have so many docks that the county commissioners passed an ordinance in 2016 to regulate where you could place your dock, because when you have 16,000 docks, eventually you're going to have neighbors that use them to kind of needle each other. You can see in this picture right here, this is a current court case we have right now between two landowners that are using their docks to kind of get at each other. And this is going to court. And there's some criminal charges being filed for this particular case. Speaking of shoreland management, that's another thing that our department does besides septic regulations. We regulate any activity within 1,000 feet of a lake. Here's all the permits that we've issued in Otter Tail County since 2018. We issue on average about 650 permits a year for any dwelling, any accessory structure, any earth moving within 1,000 feet of a lake is regulated and has to get a permit from the county. We're very busy with just shoreline management regulation. Our department also has a wetland conservation program. We have 342,127 acres of wetland in Otter Tail County. That's 535 square miles of wetlands. The average size is 5.4 acres. The department has its own certified wetland delineator whose main duty includes enforcing the Minnesota Wetland Conservation Act. Again, Otter Tail County has a lot of water. Here you see the Continental Divide. On the north side, all the water flows to the Red River through Fargo, through Winnipeg, and eventually gets to the Hudson Bay. On the south side, this is part of the Mississippi watershed, which eventually goes to the Gulf of Mexico. We have signs throughout the county anytime you encounter the Continental Divide, because it's kind of neat. So again, I'm the director of a department called Land and Resource Management. We have 3 managers, myself, we have an assistant director, and an office manager. We have 4 office staff, an administrative assistant that answers the front desk phone and greets people as they come to the front counter. And then we have 3 permit techs. These are people that help people at the front counter anytime they need a permit to install a septic system or get a building permit for a structure that they want to put within 1,000 feet of the lake. Then we have field staff, we have 5 inspectors, all of which are certified as septic inspectors, 2.5 FTE for septic permits and inspections, and then 2.5 FTEs for building permits and inspections. But they can all do the same work and they back each other up when need be. And then again, we have a certified wetland delineator whose main duties is to enforce the Wetland Conservation Act. And then we also have an AIS specialist. AIS is Aquatic Invasive Species. This person manages our AIS program with all those boat accesses we have in Otter Tail County. Every summer, we hire 25 temporary employees that sit at those boat accesses and inspects boats on the way in and on the way out to make sure that they're not introducing any type of aquatic invasive species to that water, and to make sure that they're not taking any aquatic invasive species with them to potentially infest the next lake that they go to. All our permit applications are online. Here's some permit numbers and inspection numbers for septic systems since 2018. In 2018, we issued 632 septic permits and did 752 inspections. And in 2019, we issued 567 permits and did 1,306 septic inspections. Now, the big jump there between 2018 and 2019 is on January 1st of 2019, we began doing soil verifications on any septic permit application that we received. That wasn't being done before. So it doubled the workload for our staff, which meant we had to get a new position in 2019. And so far in 2020, we've issued 574 septic permits. Through September of 2020, we've issued 36% more permits than we did in September of 2019. When COVID hit, I thought everybody was going to stop working and people were just going to hunker down and wait out the pandemic, and the opposite happened. I think with all the stimulus money people were getting, people were bored. That prompted them to do a number of projects that required some septic upgrades to happen. Again, all of our permit applications are done online through a platform called RT Vision. This is what that platform looks like. Here is the septic permit application. So any inspector with our department can go in and look at this link here called a dashboard, and you can quickly review all active septic permit applications and see what its current status is, whether it's been approved, whether it's been completed. This tells us that the system's been installed and a certificate of compliance has been issued and as-bilt's been received. If the application's been returned to the applicant. And anybody can go, any staff can click this blue link right here and go in and see why the permit was returned to the applicant. When we return it to the applicant, we put a reason down, and then when we hit update that status, that person automatically gets an email saying your application has been returned and gives them the reason why it was returned and what deficiencies they need to overcome to get that permit back up and running. You can go into individual permit records, and if you look, there's some tabs up here. Right now, we're in the overall permit application tab. You can scroll down and view who the applicant is, what the location is, what type of system, all the design specs. You can download a PDF of the design site plan, as well as the design worksheets. There's other tabs. There's one for a site review, and that details the soil information. There's the installation inspection tab, and then an as-built. And then there's also buttons for the actual permit itself that a homeowner could click and see that the permit's been issued. And when all is said and done and an as-built's been received and everything is up to code, the final piece of this puzzle is a certificate of compliance is issued. And I'll detail these here in the next few slides. Here we click on the soil or site review tab, and you can quickly see that on September 21st of 2020, one of my inspectors went out and did a soil verification. And here is a thumbnail of that soil observation log that she took a picture with it with her iPhone and put it into this tab right on her iPhone. Zooming in on that, you can see a detailed soil description. And this is an important note right here. She made on her comment that she was on site with designer Bill Schuler, which meant that the designer and the local regulator did a soil observation together and came to an agreement on what the depth of that restriction was. That helps the designers better design the systems that they know will have 36 inches of separation. All this information is uploaded into our online permitting system, and any member of the public can see this information. Here is the inspection tab. So once the permit's been issued and the system's being installed, the installers are required to call the front desk and schedule an inspection. And then when the inspectors go out, they open up this tab right on their iPads, and they put in who put the system in, the name of the certified individual, what day the tank was inspected, what day the soil treatment area was inspected, who inspected it, final, all the information. And I can't scroll down because this is a static picture, but all the information below this point here is all the specifics on that installation. All that information is put in right at the fingertips of the inspector on their iPads, and when they're done, they hit save, and it's all done and goes up in the cloud. And then when all is said and done, and the installer submits an as-built, we issue a certificate of compliance. And all this information is required by the state of Minnesota to be on a certificate of compliance. For example, obviously where the system was installed, the date of installation, who installed it, who the certified individual was, their license number, who the county inspector was, and their certification number, the dates of inspections, well setbacks, and then soil verification information. You can see here that Jessica, the same inspector that did the inspection, did a soil observation and decided or determined that the depth of restriction was 62 inches. The system was installed at 26 inches. Therefore, that gives us a vertical separation of 36. This is really important information to have in the future because in the state of Minnesota, when we do a compliance inspection of an existing system, if 2 independent soil verifications were done, the compliance inspector does not have to consider soils during that inspection. This certificate of compliance exempts a future compliance inspection from having to do a soil verification. That doesn't mean that they don't have to. They can still go out there and decide to do a soil verification, but if they use this information and things seem okay, this exempts them from having to do that. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. We do soil verification for permitting in Otter Tail County. Minnesota rules require that an in-field verification of the periodically saturated soil or bedrock at the proposed soil treatment area must be conducted by a qualified employee of the local unit of government. Minnesota requires that the verification occur prior to the issuance of the certificate of compliance, but they don't say when. It has to be any time before that certificate is issued. Some counties choose to do that soil verification at the time of installation, which was the practice at this county before 2 years ago. That to me seems risky. If a designer designs an in-ground system and the installer puts it in, calls for an inspection, the county inspector comes out and then verifies the soils and sees something different, a couple things might happen. One, you might have a new inspector who's a little green, a little scared of upsetting people, and just might let it go. And now we have a failed system in the ground. Or you might have somebody that's a little more confident and says, hey, I see things a little bit differently here. I think we need a mound here rather than an in-ground system. Now the installer just spent the last day or two putting in an in-ground system that shouldn't have been there. That makes for a lot of unhappy people. The homeowner is going to be unhappy. The installer is going to be unhappy. The county inspector is probably not going to be happy because they're going to get yelled at. So to me, this isn't a real wise time to do a soil verification. Instead, what I like to do, and what a lot of counties in the state of Minnesota does, is they do soil verification prior to the permit being issued. So that's a policy that we instituted here in Otter Tail County in the last 2.5 years. In fact, it's written in our ordinance that this has to happen. Like I just said, Otter Tail County requires in its ordinance that the soil verification must occur by a local government unit inspector prior to the permit being issued. So what we do in Otter Tail County is a licensed septic designer schedules a soil verification with the office, just like a licensed installer would schedule an installation inspection. They get on the schedule just like everybody else. County staff meets the designer on site after the soil work is complete. I've made it very clear with the designers that what we don't want is my inspectors showing up and they haven't even started their work. So they're essentially helping them design the system. We want the designer to have already been out there for a few hours, taken some soil borings, and determining what type of system it is. And then when the county inspector shows up, they do a verification boring to make sure that the county is on the same page with the designer. Some soil observation options. You can use a hand auger like you see here, most often used for soil verification, or you can use a soil pit, which is in the state of Minnesota, anything over 5,000 gallons per day is required to have a soil pit. Here's an oldie but a goodie. This was me from about 5 years ago at my previous location down in the Twin Cities, doing a soil verification with a hand auger. It is the most economical choice. Soil augers aren't that expensive, a couple $100. It's actually good exercise. It kept me in pretty good shape. But it's not the best choice for rocky soil, and the county that I did work in had a lot of rocky soil. Here again is a soil observation log that a county inspector would complete when they do soil verification. Or you can do a soil pit. The same information is identified. It's easier to identify the soil horizons. Rock fragment layers are easier to identify, but there are some safety issues. If the soil pit is greater than 4 feet, it's unsafe to go in case you have a collapse. Again, same information is gleaned from a soil pit as from a hand auger soil observation. Here is how we measure rock fragments in the state of Minnesota. We encounter this a lot. Even in Otter Tail County, we do have some rocky soil. So we verify soils, we agree with the designer, we approve the permit. Sometime down in the future, a licensed installer is going to install the system. We require that the licensed installer contact our administrative assistant to schedule an inspection. I don't let the contractors call our inspectors directly to schedule inspections. They can call them for general questions about, a question on this installation, a question on that installation. But if they want to schedule an inspection, they have to go through the front desk. The county ordinance also requires that request be received by 4 p.m. the day before the inspection is needed. This allows our staff to get out in the field sooner and get more inspections in a day than in the past. The administrative assistant schedules the inspection on one of 2 Outlook calendars. We have a West calendar and an East calendar, because again, the county's that big. The administrative assistant also drops a pin on an ArcGIS online map. I'll talk about why that's important in a few minutes. Staff meet after 4 p.m. every day and view the Outlook calendars and the map for spatial reference. Staff decide amongst themselves who is taking what inspections. Here's a typical installation in Minnesota, probably very similar to installations you see in your part of the country. We also use GIS quite heavily in the septic program in our department. This is something I introduced in the last couple of years. Field staff GPS all septic inspections. The equipment that they use an iPad, which you can see here in the background. That's an iPad. They use the ESRI Collector app with a program developed by ProWest out of Walker, Minnesota. They also use what's called a Bad Elf GNSS surveyor. Bad Elf is the name of the company. And what it is, it's a Bluetooth GPS device. It's this little guy right here. And it communicates with the iPad via Bluetooth. And what it does is it picks up on not only the satellites that are orbiting around the Earth, but it also picks up on the WASP satellites on the east and west coast. And the reason you want to do that is because those satellites are on a geosynchronous orbit. And if you can lock in on those, you can pull in your accuracy to within sub-meter. And for septic installation GPSing, sub-meter is good enough. We don't need centimeter accuracy like some of the surveyor grade GPS units. To locate a 4-inch inspection pipe or a 4-inch casing on a well, to us, sub-meter is good enough. So here's the app that was developed that allows staff to GPS things in the field. And I'm going to go through each one of these. So here is the septic inventory. So they open up their ESRI Collector app, and this is the dashboard that they see, and they click on that. And here's what the map looks like. All these points are points that have been collected since February of this year. This year is when in 2020, is when we started field staff GPSing septic information. So using your fingertips, just like on a smartphone, you can zoom in. On the right side here, you can see all the information that we can edit. We can collect points for soil treatment areas. We can collect points for septic tanks, for soil observations or soil borings. And then if there's a well on site, we want them to collect that point as well. So zooming in further, so here's a lot somewhere in Otter Tail County that it looks like on May 12th of this year, Tyler, he's our wetland delineator, but he also does septic inspections, conducted a soil observation. But this is the important information here. In this app, one of the data points that we want them to collect is the depth of the restriction. And here it's 72 inches. We also want to note who conducted the soil observation. And in this case, it's the county. Here's a well that was captured back on August 13th of 2020 by one of our inspectors. And one thing I want you to look at, one thing we have in our editable fields is the unique well ID. So if there's a blue well tag on the well, the inspectors are to put the well ID, and from there we can go to the Minnesota County Well Index, put in that unique well ID and get all the information on when that well was drilled. The other thing I want you to look at here is this photo. Right within the app that was developed by ProWest, we have the ability to take a picture and embed it behind this point. So you can see that this point is highlighted. You can click on this JPEG and get a picture of the well. So inspectors take pictures of all the wells that they encounter, all the septic tanks that they GPS, all the drain fields, and anything that they GPS, they're to capture a picture first. That way we have a really good record of what went in the ground and what it looked like before it was covered up, which sometimes is important when you're trying to troubleshoot a system or trying to locate exactly where things are. Those pictures come in very, very handy. So the next thing I want to talk about is what we call active permits. So remember earlier when I talked about the other part of our department issues building permits for any structure that is being built within 1,000 feet of a lake. Before we had this app, all those permits were printed and there was a stack of active permits and there was a stack of expired permits. And staff would come in and say, well, I think I'm going to be in this area for the day. I'm going to grab a handful of permits in that area. And if I have time, I'm going to go inspect those structures. This app eliminated that need. So this app, all these blue dots represent a permit that was issued and it updates every 15 minutes. So if a permit was issued a half an hour ago, it will show up here. So if someone's out in the field, they can see permits that have been issued in the last 15 minutes. So what this allows inspectors to do, occasionally when you're out on inspections, you have a little time to kill. You're between inspections and they can pull up this app, see where they're located, and quickly assess permits around them that are ready for inspection, and then go to those points and inspect them. So here's a permit. This is actually my house. I used my house, so it was my name on it. So I didn't insult anybody with privacy concerns. I used to use a permit that I had to pull this past August. So here's a permit that was issued. So this blue dot tells us that. When you click on it, you can see who the owner is. That's me, the address, what type of permit it is. In this case, it's a lot alteration permit. I had to do a little driveway repair this past summer after a couple of heavy rainfalls washed my driveway out. The neat thing about this is this button right here that says View Permit Record. So if you click that, it opens up the permit in RT Vision. And then the inspector can go to the inspection tab and put their data in. So everything is now GIS based, and they can view a permit right from within their ESRI collector app. So this eliminates all the need to print those permits and have staff guess at where they're going to be. This is updated live and allows them to be more efficient out in the field. Me as a supervisor, I have that same view. I could use my iPad or I can use my desktop. Here's the desktop view of the same information. This is the septic inventory on a desktop. I can zoom in and click on any of these points and see who was there, what was installed, and get a picture of it. It's pretty neat. So why are we here? We're here to talk about what we did in relation to COVID. So I just wanted an overview of what we did, and now I'll talk about how we responded to COVID. In mid-March, like the rest of us, the office instituted some procedures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The County Board of Commissioners officially closed the building to the public on March 18th. So we got together, me, the office manager, and my assistant director, to decide how we were going to respond to that. And we had one goal, just one goal through this whole thing, and that was to do everything we could to keep our staff upright. Because we knew if any of our staff went down and got COVID, it could shut our entire department down. And if our department got shut down and nobody could work, that would have a ripple effect across the county, as septic contractors wouldn't be able to get their permits, builders wouldn't be able to get their permits. We saw the long-reaching effects of us keeping or having anybody get COVID. So we had one goal and one goal in mind, and that was to keep everybody healthy. So right away, we got everybody out. We got everybody working from home, and we decided on any given day, there would only be one manager present. There would only be one office staff present. Everybody else would be working from home on their laptops. Field staff was easy because this was getting to be about the time of the year where the ground starts thawing and building and septic stuff starts happening. So it was a real good time for field staff. We were able to get them into their homes. The county administration allowed them to take their county vehicles home so they could stage right out of their home and get their inspection scheduled for the day, right sitting in their kitchen, and then leave right from their house. Since we're also the planning and zoning office for the county, we had to make some substantial changes for public hearings. Our Board of Adjustment and Planning Commission hearings were held via GoToMeeting. I have to run the meetings. During those meetings, I share my screen to put the application, aerial photography, rules, any other information that the Board of Adjustment or the Planning Commission asks for to assist them to better make decisions. Muting has been an issue. Usually I ask applicants and people that are on the call to mute their microphones because we've all been on enough of these virtual meetings now to know if somebody has their microphone unmuted, it could be very distracting. And it seems like a lot of times I spend a lot of my time just fighting with muting issues where somebody doesn't realize they're not muted and it sounds like they're eating a bag of potato chips or something. County board meetings were also held via GoToMeeting. Shortly after the pandemic and we all started working out of our home and we started doing these virtual meetings, we realized the platform that the county was using, the county board was using, was not real good because it allowed people to hack in. And there were some very vulgar things that were said during official county board meetings that the county administration had to go to a WebEx hosting service instead, which allowed the board secretary to have a little more control about who speaks and who doesn't. Field staff, we were on the path of this anyways, but COVID forced us to do it. But we use COVID as a reason to really launch this forward. We got laptops for all the field staff. We put vehicle mounts in their county vehicles, like you see here. So here's a laptop on a mount. The iPads that we bought them last year to start GPSing things in the field can also be used as a hotspot, so they can have their laptop connect to the internet via their iPad. And again, field staff staged right out of their home. Their truck was parked out in front of their house. They got in their truck with their cup of coffee and got their inspection scheduled for the day and took off doing their field work. We had some requirements for field staff. One of the inspector's mothers was kind enough to make homemade masks. If you remember back in March and April, it was really difficult to get, an N95 mask. So we were all dealing with these homemade masks. One of the moms made masks for all of our staff, not just field staff, everybody. And they use them to this day. We required that the mask must be worn by field staff anytime they were conducting an inspection on site when a contractor or a homeowner was present. Here you see Andrea is at a site doing an inspection of a septic system. Looks like someone's in the backhoe there, so she has to have her mask on. Here Kyle's at a Board of Adjustment site with a farmer. We make sure that they maintain 6 feet, and Kyle wears a mask. We have no control over the homeowner or the contractor, so that's why you see the farmers not wearing a mask. But we didn't want field staff to get into arguments with people. We just said the only people you can control is yourself, so you wear a mask, don't worry about the homeowner. If they wear a mask, great. If they don't worry about it. Soil verification needed to be conducted within that 6-foot social distancing space. So then in June, the county started phasing reopening the building. So what we did is the public could come in on an appointment only basis. So here you see me meeting with some property owner who needed a conditional use permit for some storage buildings. But here he came into my office by an appointment and sat down and met with me. We had one appointment per half-hour time slot. Plexiglass barriers were installed at the front counter, and staff were required to remain behind the plexiglass and wear masks at the same time while assisting residents at the counter. The county has acquired CARES Act money and are going to be using it to install permanent glass barriers at the front counter that will replace those plexiglass barriers. Office staff were required to wear masks while interacting with the public and each other. So on July 8th of this year, the county buildings were reopened to the public. Again, just like when we were only allowing one person in at a time, staff were still required to remain behind the plexiglass and wear masks while assisting residents at the counter. Again, the message to my staff was the same as to field staff, that we can only control ourselves. Although masks were mandated by the governor of Minnesota on July 25th, if a resident didn't have a mask on, I did not want them to make an issue of it. Continue to help them just like you would if they had a mask on. So that was our response to COVID. We're still doing this today, as COVID is still a thing. We're still in this pandemic, but we're already starting to look at what this means for the future. We do have an off season here in Minnesota. So management, including myself, have sat down and talked about what off season is going to look like. Ground freezes in mid to late November and thaws in mid to late March. So we have a lot of downtime in Minnesota in this industry. We're going to kind of go back to where we were in the early parts of this pandemic, where we don't need many people in the office during the winter. So we're going to have one manager per day, and office staff and field staff are going to work from home 50% of the time and work at the office the other 50% of the time. What I don't want to have happen is all 14 people are in our department at once. Staff are going to be working every other day, one day at home, one day in the office. After COVID, field staff will likely remain in this mode from this point forward. Again, I was going this direction anyways. COVID just forced us to do it. The department will begin migrating all of its files from an internal network server to cloud-based storage. That way, as long as you're somewhere in the world with a Wi-Fi connection, you can access necessary files. And Otter Tail County Administration is currently working with a consultant out of the Twin Cities to assess our building needs in a post-COVID world. We've realized we don't need to house all these people anymore, and maybe we should migrate more to a off-site business model at the county. Public hearings for Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment. We've heard nothing but positive feedback from the members of the public that they like the go-to meeting option. We have a lot of our residents are transient residents from the Twin Cities or from the Fargo-Moorhead area. So we've already made the realization that why would we make somebody from the Twin Cities drive 3.5 hours for a 10-minute meeting with the Board of Adjustment or Planning Commission when we figured out how to do this remotely? So once we're out of this pandemic and we have a vaccine and we can get back to normal, we're probably going to go to a hybrid model where the Planning Commission or Board of Adjustment will be present, like they had pre-COVID. But if a homeowner wants to remote in, that's going to be an option for them. If they want to come in, great. But if they want to do it remotely from a laptop, that works as well. I have been told that the GoToMeeting platform is not going to be used next year. We're going to be moving to a Microsoft Teams format in 2021. In conclusion, the changes that we made to account for COVID were very easy to make since we were already on the way to making these changes anyways. COVID just forced us to do it. Remember, our goal at the beginning of COVID was to keep everybody healthy. We have yet to have anybody in our department contract COVID or any of their family members. We have had a few that have had to quarantine because they've had close contacts with people that tested positive for COVID, but so far we have not had anybody in our department contract COVID. And I think that's because we've been diligent. We've been very diligent with staff about wearing masks. Some of them aren't pleased about it, but they've gotten used to it. As a result, we've been able to keep our staff healthy and continue to operate and serve the residents of Otter Tail County. Thank you for your time.